Actually JFDM.
We played D&D last night, and I'm running a campaign using the adventures in Strongholds and Followers and Kings and Warfare. The Strongholds and Follower adventure begins at level 5, and the Kingdoms and Warfare adventure, I believe, begins at level 7. I knew I wanted to have a small lead into the Stronghold and Followers adventure, so I flipped through my other MCDM products and pulled the Burnock Mill scenario out of Where Evil Lives. Burnock Mill is optimized for a 5th level party. My players are on level 4. Players tend to make relatively optimized characters, so I wasn't particularly worried about the level discrepancy after I made some minor adjustments. So the first session happens, and after the intro and hot start chimera encounter I cooked up, they traveled up the road and entered the Burnock Mill scenario. Now the players do the first encounter in the Burnock Mill and end up with a prisoner, an elderly wizard guy by the name of Grey Walter. Now, the book says any named people are lieutenants of the big bad and fight to the death, or tell the players nothing if captured. I didn't like that, so I threw that out. In fact, I watched James Introcaso, the lead MCM designer, run this very layer from the book in a VOD, and his players captured Grey Walter, and James did not have him act according to the book, so I felt justified in doing what I did. So these bandits, they hang out on this bridge and make people that are crossing it pay them a toll. Basic classic trope. The half-orc monk, Rarg, walked onto the bridge and was told by the lead brawler bandit, Maggie, that he would need to make a donation. When he refused and condemned what the bandits were doing, Maggie said, "It seems we need to teach this insolent half-breed a lesson." She referred to him in that pejorative, fairly racist way and wound up to punch him, to teach him a lesson. As a context, that player had messaged me privately before the campaign started, specifically stating that he wanted his character to be in situations where people referred to him in those types of ways to test him. His character became a monk to try to stay level against things like that. And in fact, he specifically chose half-orc because of the way it fits into the Vasloria setting. Before I ran this campaign, I let the players vote on if this game and setting would be something they wanted to play. Wanted to give them every possible out, effectively. I ran multiple games at this point, and I only wanted to run another if it was going to be something I was distinctly interested in running. Otherwise, it probably wasn't going to be fun or very good. And there was another member of the group who would run something else if the group bounced off of this pitch, so it wasn't a choose this or no D&D scenario. There was another option. But the document made it very clear that Vasloria, this setting, has xenophobia issues. Most of the players read the document, which I'll link down below if you want to read what I sent them, and remarked, "Wow, this is a racist setting, huh?" To which I said, a bit. Yes, it was initiative. And the players won the fight. They killed the 3 apprentice mages, which were the kids of Grey Walter, and incapacitated both Maggie and Grey Walter, ending the fight with 2 prisoners. Brarg, the monk, walked over to Maggie and smashed her body into the ground until it broke, ending her life. I think one of the other players was like, "Oh, wow, you're just killing her," but no one stopped him. That was sort of how I felt, almost dumbfounded in that moment. So the session ended there, and we all knew we would be coming back into the next session, starting with an interrogation of Grey Walter after the grisly act of Rarg. So a week goes by, and the players begin their questioning, and well, I think anyone who has DM'd a situation like this at some point has been in the same boat as I was in. The players, having won the fight, and also not being the ones who explicitly started it, assumed the moral high ground, and believed everything they did was completely justified. They want to ride roughshod over Grey Walter the Bandit Wizard, get everything, give nothing, and think themselves the heroes. There will be no bargains. There will be no exchange. It will be a one-way flow of everything this NPC has to the players. It is to me a very murder-hobo mentality. Someone doesn't agree explicitly with everything we're saying? Murder. Threaten. We are big and strong, and you are in our power, and you were doing something bad, therefore you have no rights. I think you probably know how I was playing this NPC. He wanted to live. He gave the heroes plenty of information. But the minute he withheld and wanted to bargain for his life, everyone lost their minds. The sorcerer, who's a baronet, begins lecturing about laws. When this relatively learned wizard counters that they're not in a barony, let alone the sorcerer's barony, chaos rules because the overlord doesn't enforce anything, and the sorcerer's laws technically don't apply here, the player hates that. And I don't mean his character disagrees, which he did, but it is evident that the player is annoyed with the pushback. When the wizard points out that yes, they were taking money, and yes, the brawler punched Rarg, but boldly claims that they would not have killed the heroes because they could be ransomed or knocked out and cleaned out of their money. Whereas you, who claim to be heroes, killed my 3 children and Maggie. That's not law or justice, that's tyranny. You're no better than Baron Uthrak. He does that type of thing. The players are flabbergasted. How could this person be saying that? They attacked us. We are not at fault. They are. And now they're talking about killing Grey Walter. The players went on a tirade trying to show this wizard that they were in charge. He was a law-breaking bandit, and they could dispense whatever justice they wanted, basically proving Grey Walter's point, which he pointed out, saying, "Fine then, kill me. Be just as bad as Uthrak, maybe worse. If this is how you treat those at your mercy, you are no heroes." It was at this point that the players were obviously frustrated. It felt like tensions were running high, so I said over the table, "Hey, guys, you can do whatever you want. I'm not telling you not to kill this NPC. The NPC is telling you not to kill this NPC. But some of the things he's saying are kind of true. It would not be all that heroic." Which no one said you had to be. Have you found yourself in this situation before, or this position? It isn't often in our lives where we have total control and great power over another person. And I think it's a very typical trap for players to fall into, that a hostage or a prisoner is just a disposable information well whose life and desires aren't real. And this notion that they can act however they want and still claim moral superiority, act in whatever way they want with no consequences because the other person broke the law first, is the players thinking that two wrongs make a right. And I think we all have heard the opposite. Two wrongs don't make a right. There's a quote from something: "If you murder a murderer, the number of murderers in the world hasn't changed." Well, as it turns out, if you murder a thief, the number of murderers in the world has only increased. Ultimately, the resolution was fine. The sorcerer player took the mantle of lawbreaking baronet and encouraged the other members of the group that they needed to be better than Baron Uthrak, needed to give second chances to those who could be reasoned with, those who would leave here and not be seen doing bad stuff in these lands again. In this moment, that player made a decision. Chose to roleplay the way he wanted his character to be. I visually watched on his webcam as his posture went from sunken in the chair with arms crossed to engaged in his character and having a belief in the rule of law of the barons and taking a stand on its behalf. He dropped the murder-hobo mentality and engaged in a little bit of empathy, and it was pretty cool to witness. They ended up sparing Grey Walter. They let him leave, never to return. And Grey Walter almost immediately doubled back to stab them in the back at the best possible moment. Just kidding. That would be funny. But it wouldn't be in the character of this NPC to be devious like that, the way that I had been playing him. He wanted to go and find his last remaining child, a daughter, and spend time with her, because he lost his 3 other kids by being on the lawless side. How can you diffuse tension and try to dissuade the murder-hobo mentality without removing the agency of the players? Well, I mean, you just heard how I managed to do it. I went over the table and reminded the players they had the agency to deal with this person however they wanted, but if they're going to be capricious and needlessly cruel, that elicits a certain response. And while there was an extended moment of what felt like DM player tension more than NPC PC tension, ultimately it resolved in a way that certainly I liked more than the way it seemed to be going. It remains to be seen if this mentality affects things moving forward, though they entered the first floor of the mill and non-lethally dealt with nearly all the enemies there, even letting one named NPC, who took a beating and then begged to be spared, leave and take her 5 friends with her. I think that by and large, this is a way most, if not all, players have acted at some point. Hell, I know I have felt this way. And in my mind, when I was playing, how I was acting and how I thought the NPC should have been responding was completely logical. So this was a big, long story to say, I think you will have a more fun experience at the table if you take the world on its terms. I'm pretty sure this is a thing Matt Colville has talked about. If you imagine the NPCs that you're talking to, interrogating, or fighting against complexly, they become more than just a disposable well of information to be passed on before you drop them and never think about them again. They cease to be a bag of made-up hit points you need to deplete before you get to feel a win. If you imagine them as real people and try to solve what it is they want rather than what it is you want out of them, now you are role-playing. Hitting upon the questions to ask or the angle to play to get the most out of an NPC is a subtle thing. Most players want to use the massive bludgeoning device, fully submit to us or face the consequences. And sometimes fully submit to us and face consequences, because we're just going to kill you anyway. My game tends to have a lot of combat against existential threats, the type of thing that is truly kill or be killed. So when I throw the lesser stakes combats at my players, the type where letting someone live doesn't mean you are going to have to stop them from ending the world next week now too, they're so used to kill, the non-lethal and merciful options don't even occur to them. And I think that extends to non-combat encounters too. So where does this leave us? As a DM, if you challenge that murder-hobo mindset that a lot of players tend to have for perfectly legitimate reasons, you are probably going to be met with some pushback. You're probably going to be met with some grumpy players. But I'm here to tell you that it's worth the effort to confront them about it. It's worth the effort to try to work it out with them. It only gets better once that mindset as a whole gets dropped, and that simply becomes another arrow in their quiver as opposed to the only arrow in their quiver. If that works every time, then they're a hammer and every problem's a nail. And you as the DM just happen to be laying nails down for them to hammer in every time. So hopefully this anecdote and explanation of a little bit of how I view the game is useful to someone. Let me know if you have experienced this, if you've been a player and felt like your DM was being purposefully obtuse with someone you were interrogating or trying to converse with. And if looking back, you can maybe see a different angle you could have played, or if what you were doing was right. You know, I'm sure there are plenty of situations where taking the roughshod approach could be the right one. But again, another arrow in the quiver, not the entire quiver. We'll see you on the next one.